This is Matt Harris with Verado, and today we have Dan Bubniak. Did I say it right? Bubniak. I knew I was going to screw that up. Dan Bubniak, right?
Yep.
Right. And he has, he's going to talk to us about what he does and his background. And I think it might be interesting to hear how he's come to be an advocate of EOS. But I'll let him tell that story. So anyway, welcome.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. So just start with my background. So, I started out of college, got my CPA, jumped into the accounting world. Spent about 4 years at Deloitte, working in tax down in Stanford on big private equity companies. And, I learned a ton, but honestly, I looked at my future and I didn't want to be a tax accountant with the rest of my life. Yeah. No offense to tax accountants. I honestly, great people, just a very niche industry.
So you got your MBA?
Not my MBA. No. Just right out of college.
Just right out.
Put my head down, CPA.
So UConn, 4 years straight.
UConn, 4 years, locked myself in a closet, studied for the CPA for 6 months, and just went on.
Now, were your parents thinking, God, this is, our son's made it. This is exactly what we wanted for him. I can see some parents being like, oh yes, stable job.
Yeah, I mean, I actually chose accounting because my parents were like, accounting's a really stable profession, and I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I was good at math. Yeah. So I figured, all right, let me do accounting, and I jumped in. So it was kind of that classic, path down into a profession.
Yeah, because your parents don't want any pain, okay, that's safe.
Totally. Yeah. Which is why I think I was always competitive growing up. Once I got in the space, tax was so niche that I wanted to break out of it. I wanted to be in more general business and build something, which is kind of what got me out of it.
Okay.
Which is where I eventually took a jump off a cliff around 4 years into Deloitte. I was moving up quickly, doing really well, but an opportunity presented itself to join a family business. A friend of mine, his dad started, and they gave me the classic, CFO title, where it was like, okay, there was no one in finance. It was just the title.
Taxes, right?
Yeah. So I was like, if anything, I could use this title to leap out of tax and into more of the broader finance world. So I didn't necessarily think or assume the business was going to be successful. It was more opportunistic. But from there, it kind of set me on an entrepreneurial journey over the next 7-8 years.
So you were in that company for 7 years?
Yeah, seven-ish years up until about a year ago. When I joined it, I was the CFO, but really coming in to try to put some more infrastructure around finance. The business had an offering that had started to gain some traction in the Northeast. It was a small local business. We did natural food merchandising. And essentially what people would do was hire us to go into grocery stores to represent their brands on shelf. In essence, there was 30,000 brands and not enough employees in stores. Right. And so brands needed help. They needed an ability to get someone in the store and help them differentiate from the shelf.
And is there still that, I've heard about the fight for shelf space?
Yes, it's real.
So you guys were in that world.
That was our job. Our job was to help a brand stand out from the other 1,000 brands on the shelf. Okay. And we did that by being present. And so it was a basic business model. But, when I started, it was 20, 30 employees here in the Northeast. So it wasn't terribly small, but it wasn't this huge, massive company. But we were kind of at the ceiling when I joined.
How old was it when you started?
It was about 3 years.
So it was a startup.
It was a startup. Yep. It was a startup, but it was the typical, family business where really good people, a big conglomerate of people that were awesome, but no structure. Right. And so I came in.
A lot of people wearing multiple hats.
People wearing multiple hats. Didn't get paid my first paycheck because we didn't have money. So I was like, oh, this is a bad situation. Did I make the right choice? But from there, it was kind of the typical entrepreneur story where it was like, just sink or swim, right? Sink or, go out there, figure it out, or the company's going to die.
So you were CFO, but it sounds like you were also thinking bigger picture, like you were outside of your typical CFO purview.
Yeah. So I started as CFO, but what quickly realized was I was the person in the organization. It was a family business, 5 other family members beyond me. They were really strong on people, on getting people to rally around something, like the strongest I've ever met, which is incredibly, I'm not that, right? I like people, but I'm not that. I'm not rah-rah. But they did not think from a process perspective. They didn't have a business background. And so I quickly took on more of that ops role as well. So I became CFO and COO. And ultimately, my job was to help put infrastructure around the business and then grow it.
So in a simplistic term, the family was the visionary, you were the implementer.
I was
and
the
you probably
implementer.
pulled some other people in to help you implement.
That's right.
But
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. So that's where we started. And, over 7 years, the idea caught wildfire. I mean, the service that we had was amazing. It was not seen in the market, but we just didn't know how to scale the business and put it across the country. And that's what we did over 7 years. We grew it from, 20 to 30 employees, bootstrapped it to about 250 employees across the country in 40 states, became the number one merchandising company in the country very quickly with the classic ups and downs and dark nights. And are we going to make payroll nights? But was an incredible kind of journey.
Yeah. Wow. So that's kind of where I think you kind of earned your stripes. Like that was, okay, small business. Now I know what this is like. Like working for Deloitte, you were probably it was a different world, right?
Yeah. I mean, when I worked for Deloitte, I thought that businesses knew what they were doing. I thought that leadership teams, CEOs, that there was some super technical group of people that like had this thing figured out. And then when I joined a small business and really, again, like you are the decision maker, you realize that nobody has any clue what they're doing.
Yeah.
Everyone's honestly just trying to fight for their lives most of the time and figure it out. So I quickly realized that business was actually much simpler than I thought it was. And simple, it was hard, but it was simple. Meaning it's very simple to make money, to find some offering that people are willing to pay for. That's simple. It's simple to do payroll. It's simple to run a basic business. But what's really hard is maintaining a discipline around keeping people organized, around keeping people focused, around, needing to fire people if they're not doing the things they need to do or reflecting your culture in a way that you need to reflect. To maintain that discipline and rigor every single day was much harder than I anticipated it would be.
We have a lot of our clients are small businesses, small to medium-sized businesses, which are like, 20 to 200, 300, 400 employees. Some are 5 employees, but mostly it's in the like 2 to 500 employee range. And most of them are either first or second generation businesses, but they're mostly, businesses that have been around for a while. And, you engage with these businesses and try to work with them and you realize they know their business a lot of times.
Yeah.
They're very much in the weeds of their own business, but they're not necessarily outside of their business. They're very much insulated in their own businesses. And then when the kind of trust builds and they'll open up to you, they'll say, we're just making this up.
Yeah.
Like we're literally just like, we don't know what we're doing. We're just making it up. I'm like, listen, I'll tell you something. Everybody is. Everybody's making it up, like particularly small businesses. And, there's nothing to really be ashamed of. I think that when you have that kind of, it's a little bit open in those early stages where you're being really creative and you're trying to come up with a solution or a product, a service, and then a solution. That's when it can be really, really fun. And then you have to like create process around it.
Yeah, totally.
And then that's where I think some businesses reach a kind of ceiling.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
like,
Totally.
well, we have this team, we have this product, but we can't really scale it now.
It's every business. I mean, every business grows the exact same way. And it's exactly what you said. And I learned this the hard way, which is it's not terribly difficult to figure out, again, a hole in the market where you can put together this product that makes sense and that someone will pay for. And when you're the entrepreneur, you can go out and actually do the work. So you're in the weeds doing the work. And when you find that product offering, you perfect it. But then to grow that business, you go from it being a product or service business to it being about moving people in the same direction. Yeah. And you get there anywhere from $5 to $10 million is when it's like, all right, the entrepreneur has to get out of doing the work and becoming a leader.
Totally.
And that's a skill set that most entrepreneurs don't have.
Yeah, and it's really fearful. It's really scary.
It's fearful
for them. Yeah.
And that's where we see people hitting the ceiling is what we call it. It's where a business tends to plateau. And what they do when they're at the ceiling determines, are they going to break through and get to the next level? Will they stall for a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? Will they eventually fall? Yeah. Unfortunately, those entrepreneurs that I think have a little bit more of an ego, that's when they stall for longer
Totally.
because they're unwilling to change.
Yeah. And the ceiling becomes that owner.
The
That
ceiling
owner
becomes
is
the owner.
the
And
ceiling
then
is
they begin to resent their business
Yeah.
and they feel like they're in handcuffs. And
I think what happens with a lot of businesses is there'll be the founder, and they're like, I know this is what the market needs. I know how to make it. I'm going to make it.
yeah,
Now I need some help. So conceptually, what they're doing is they're adding arms to the octopus. They're like, I'm going to be the brains of this business,
yeah,
but I need these different hands doing different things. So what you're essentially doing is you're the primary engine and you're just adding components
That's
to
right.
the engine. But what you need to do is to scale is to swap out the motor. You
Mhm.
can't be that primary motor if you're the owner or you're building
Yeah, it's
some
right.
kind of enterprise that's going to scale.
Yep.
And then a lot of owners will say, well, then what's my value? And it's like, well, you built it to here. That's the hardest part. Like
Yep.
getting it from 0 to, 20 people, that's rough. That's rough sailing. Getting it from 20 to 200 is also a huge challenge, but it just requires a different way of thinking.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's an identity shift for them, which is the hardest thing an entrepreneur will ever deal with is letting go.
Right.
And I see it all the time. But in order for the company to grow, they have to let it go in some capacity. And so, I mean, that's a lot of what my job is as in helping entrepreneurs introduce a business operating framework like EOS. It's to help give that entrepreneur a framework where they can let go. They
Mhm.
have the tools to let go without losing control of the
And they're
business.
not, and you give them some kind of ways to measure and look at the fact that what that we're planning to do is holding without your your hands-on involvement.
Exactly.
So you can start to see how stepping away is actually working, and that kind of removes the stress of walking away.
Totally. Absolutely.
So e-commerce, let's like segue. So you left that business. So we're going to talk about e-commerce operating system, which came from this book called Traction, right?
Yeah. Entrepreneur operating system.
What did I say?
E-commerce.
Yeah, jeez, man, that's my brain. Sorry.
It's all good.
Entrepreneur. You can cut that out. No, that's fine. Entrepreneur operating system. Gino Wickman. So you were at this company for 6 or 7 years.
Yep.
And then now.
Yeah.
Now what? Tell me about this.
So I left that company because as any business grows that has multiple partners, eventually somebody in that partnership has a different vision for the future. And that was me. I had a different vision for the future. And so it was my time to kind of close that chapter. I ultimately sold my interest back to the partners and then figured out, okay, what do I want to do with my life?
Mhm.
And over the prior 7 years, I loved putting together frameworks and growing the business from a process perspective. And I had also been working alongside, 50 business owners just in the local Connecticut community and helping advise them. So I said, what can I do so that I can help harness my skill of process and scale alongside working with entrepreneurs? And that's when, I kind of fell in love with EOS and learned that you could build a business around helping coach entrepreneurs through putting more scale into their company and more systems.
So you read the book, right? And then kind of like you decided, okay, I have a different vision for this business. I was able to help them this far along.
Yep.
Now I'm going to go do something else. Was there something about that book that really kind of resonated with you?
Yeah. So I had used the tools in my business. When I was growing my business, coming from Deloitte, I had no management experience. And then all of a sudden I had, 150 people rolling up to me and it was, okay, how do I manage these people? So I'd read a bunch of books. It wasn't until I read Traction that the light bulb went off that there was a full comprehensive management system that was pretty simple. And that's when I read Traction. It was, wow, this is the thing I've been searching 5 years for in my own business. So I was very familiar with the tool set. What I wasn't familiar with was that you could go build a business around it until, one of my mentors, she became a coach using the EOS framework, was loving life. And I looked into it and I said, I want to do this. I want to bring this tool set, which I had a ton of conviction in, could help business owners. That's why I decided to do it. Was I truly believed in the system and knew the impact on how it could affect a company just in my experience with my own teams.
And do you find that, so as an entrepreneur myself, and I find that I'm, I hate the word visionary, but if you look at like the Traction language and I'm kind of like the visionary of the business, and then I have implementer operational team members that I desperately need
Sure.
because I'm not necessarily good at that stuff, the details. Do you find that? So you had been an accountant, right?
Yeah.
Was there something about having some structure around this that was really appealing to you? Like you could break it into large chunks and then smaller chunks and look through like, okay, we're going to have a process around here, and that framework makes it easier for me, easier for a potential business that I might be engaging with, kind of getting everybody on the same page.
Yeah.
Was that a big attraction to you, or was it something else?
Yeah. So what attracted me to it was prior to reading Traction, figuring out how to use metrics and figuring out how to manage people, figuring out how to structure businesses. I had read a bunch of different books, all different ways of doing this thing. And then when I read Traction, Traction's take is all of that. It's Traction's take is if you introduce one framework, one operating framework, that really takes all of those things that I just mentioned. How do you measure on numbers? How do you structure business? How do you manage people? How do you keep people accountable? Traction was a full operating system solution to that problem. So again, prior, I was just cobbling together books. It was too complex. I read this book, and really the framework that they take solves all operational problems. So when you're running a business as an entrepreneur, and if you don't have professional management experience, right? If you're in a small business, you don't know what you're doing. And you for me, I was always looking over my shoulder. Am I doing this the right way? Am I managing people the right way? Am I giving them a clear direction in the right way? Putting in place a business operating framework kind of eliminates that. So all you have to do as the entrepreneur is run the play. Let's put in place the system and run the play. Then your issues become obvious. It's up to you at that point to then address them. So it really kind of simplifies things to just, it's like a football team when you have a playbook. You know the universe. You just have to run the right play at the right time. And that's kind of what EOS does for businesses, which me as an ops-minded person, that's what I needed. I needed like the guardrails of how do you run this business in an efficient way?
Yeah, and then how do you measure that you're actually achieving your objectives?
Exactly.
When you're in the middle of it. So, you might have a 3-year objective, but how do you know 6 months in that you're actually moving towards that objective?
That's right.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Verado, the mission of Verado is to kind of help small to medium-sized businesses think about, what they can do to become more efficient or, to transform or pivot into something else or expand or grow, scale, evolve. And those are very difficult challenges, particularly if a business has been doing something the same way for 20 years.
Yeah.
And they've been successful in their own minds to do it that way. But they might have a new generation that's moving into management that might have different ideas. They could be succeeding for a while and they're not seeing the same success that they were before because the market has changed and they need to pivot. And large corporations, they have consultants that they're working with.
Yeah.
If you take like the big consulting firms, Deloitte, McKinsey, Accenture, whatever, and you look at the top 500 companies, they're all working with those consulting firms. They all have
Absolutely
people coming in saying, can we try this? How about this? Or, let's go out and do some independent research and doing a market analysis of this. And the problem with small to medium-sized businesses, which represents, half of all employment in this country and half of like the economy, they don't have that. And so it's a little bit more of what I love about it is that it's agile and can pivot. A small business can move fast if they decide to move fast, but they don't necessarily have the information to empower them to move fast in the right direction.
Sure.
Quickly or methodically, over time. And so what I'm hoping with Verado is that we can bring some of that, like the best ideas of business evolution to just the common small to medium-sized regional businesses, and that hopefully we create content that is actually appealing to them. Like people will listen to it and show
Yeah.
up at the events. And so, that's my goal. And I think the EOS, from what you've been saying, because we've been talking before, actually shares a similar kind of like mission.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it takes the mission that there's so much talent out there in the world, especially like you said, most of the businesses in the country are small to mid-sized businesses, but they get stuck or they fail because their operators, the owners, don't have professional management experience, so they can only reach a certain level. So what EOS is trying to do is give them the framework to break through that next level. That's what I love about it. Like and I was this person, it's like when you're running a business and you get stuck, you start to hate your business,
Okay.
right? Like you're working nights and weekends. I remember working on Thanksgiving and Christmas one year and, just ready to just call it quits. Like I hated my business
Yeah.
because you get to this scale where you don't know what you're doing and you feel like you're in the dark and you don't have the tools you need to kind of break through and get to the next ceiling. So for me, something like EOS is super empowering for a business owner who, when someone comes to me and they just feel like they're shackled by their business, to start to get the tool set, the training they need to actually break through and get to the next level and start loving their business again. Like you're saying with Verado, it's very similar in what we're trying to do with EOS.
I found that I noticed that there's a section on, putting the right people in the right seats, kind of.
Yeah.
Not to get all into EOS because that's a whole other thing, right? So
yeah, we could go for hours.
If you're interested in EOS, Google it, research Dan, call Dan.
Call me up.
Call Dan. He's, I'm sure would love to explain it to you over the phone or whatever. Show up at our event in October. Dan will be speaking. You can talk to him in person. But anyway, one of the sections in the book I noticed was putting the right people in the right seats.
Yeah.
One of the things that I have noticed is that sometimes there's hidden talent. There's quiet people that have tons of potential. They kind of get overlooked because they're not necessarily the loudest person in the room.
Yeah.
And what I think, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, is that it kind of allows for, there's a process around that, like making sure that everybody's heard as opposed to just like the people at the top.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, people are deceiving, if we're being honest. It's very easy if you're a sharp talker to display that you have this intricate skill set and that you should be empowered, with more ability to do your job.
More decision making.
So it's difficult to manage. Is this actually somebody who can objectively do this job well? And so what EOS does is, again, we take the concept of you have to have a right person in the right seat. And these are two different things, but you have to have both. It can't be one or the other. And it gives the operator a framework around identifying, do they have the right person in the right seat, regardless of if they talk well or if they're loud. The test is really a right person is a core values fit. And I feel like core values has a stigma around it being like fluffy BS because everyone did it back in the day.
Yeah.
But for me, core values is what I call it non-negotiable behaviors. Every business has a DNA, right? And that DNA it's kind of the personality for the business, and the employees of that business need the personality as well. And I'll give you an example. In my merchandising company, there's thousands of merchandisers out there, most of which the employees come in, they have headphones in, they don't talk to anybody in the store. They go up to the retailer and just try to get stuff done for their company that they're working for. In my business, the reason why we broke out in the market and were able to scale was because our merchandisers did the opposite. They took a retailer first mindset where the person walked in, they had to build a relationship with the retailer. They had to be the person that wanted to. How are you doing? How's your family? How's your kid? How's your son? Right? And put the retailer first. How can I help you? It was that personality that allowed us to build deep relationships with retailers and then scale. So in my business, you could wear headphones and be a merchandiser and be successful in the industry, just not at my company. It was a non-negotiable behavior that this was the type of personality you had to display in my business for it to be successful. So that's what a right person is. Somebody that objectively fits your non-negotiable behaviors, your personality of your company. Being in a right seat means that you have to gain clarity around what does the seat ultimately need to deliver to the business. So if we're talking about...
I now I get what you're saying. You're saying those are two things.
Two different things.
So you're saying the right people is actually more important or as important as you
It's
need
a
to get
50-50 equation.
right.
They're just as important.
So you could get the right person for the seat. For the role, they might be good for that role, but they're wrong for the DNA of the business.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Or whatever. Okay, gotcha.
So when you think about the right seat, if you look at a sales seat and you define, we define seats in 5 roles, like, because we need to simplify it. A sales seat, for example, needs to convert warm leads to contracts. They need to grow current accounts. They need to create a flawless onboarding experience for a customer, right? So what are the 5 roles of this seat? Then when you think of somebody in the right seat, do they actually have the technical capabilities to do this job well?
Right.
So you have to have both. But what inevitably happens when you put a framework on it is then when you put a name in a seat, you generally find 2 issues. It's either you have the right person in the wrong seat, meaning somebody actually does display your values well, but they don't have the technical capabilities to do the seat well. And you can't have that. I mean, you could have that person in your company if there's another seat open for them, but if they're not doing their job well, then the leader's going to have to step down and do their job for them.
Right.
On the other footprint, and this is more of what you alluded to in the beginning, is somebody loud that might really do their job well. And especially in sales, you have a killer who goes out there, lands a ton of deals, but they're abrasive, they're toxic. They create this environment where people around them, like, they hate being at work.
Right.
That's a right seat where someone's technically capable, but the wrong person. And in that environment, that person's cutting your culture in ways that you can't even understand, really, because people don't want to show up. People don't want to work with them. Departments stop interacting with sales, and those departments start to fall flat. So you can't have that. Like, those type of people just can't be in your business regardless of how good they are. But it's that issue that most business owners struggle to face because they're afraid, like, this is a high performer. If I lose them, but in the long run, it's killing their business.
Right.
So yeah, right people, right seats is something. We did a study, 82% of scaling issues stem from that. Right people, right seat issues.
Really?
And we say the faster you're willing to address your people issues, the faster you can scale. And I believe it's true. I've seen it time after time.
So is there ever a situation where, like, you have to, you're working with a company and you're like, you've got to let this person go?
I don't ever tell my companies what to do. In the tool set that we teach, we are teaching business owners and giving them tools to identify it. So as we're going through the process, as we're structuring their business with them, as we're going through, here's how you develop core values, here's how you measure, are people capable to do their seats? They see it. So it becomes obvious to them. Now, will they make the decision? I don't know. I mean, it's half the time, yes, they'll make it quickly. Half the time they won't because they're afraid. My job as the coach in implementing EOS is, when I see it, is to push the owner to see it and to push them to take action in some way. It's not always fire them. It could be, hey, we know this is a wrong person, so what are you going to do about it in the next month?
Right.
Are you going to sit down with them and articulate where they're missing the mark and get them there? And then if I see it for 6 months, yeah, I may shake the owner or the leadership team and say, what's going on? Like, we know this is an issue. I'm not even telling you it's an issue. You've identified it's an issue, but you're not doing anything about it. Right. So yes, I do push and hold my teams accountable, but I never tell them what to do.
Right. So you've been doing this now for how long? Since
about 9 months.
9 months.
10 months.
Okay, so you're just getting into it. And have you, in the 9 months, are there any kind of anecdotes of success or things that you've seen where you're like, okay, this is really helping?
Yeah, a couple of instances. And the two, actually, I would say 2 that stand out clearly, and they're both very different. One was actually unintended consequence. So the first I'll say is the unintended one, which is an owner that is currently exiting. We didn't know that they were going to exit coming into the process. Really, it was an owner that felt frustrated, that was in the weeds of the business, that has been doing it the same way for 20 years and really just wanted to get out and start to, like, go on vacation with his family.
Right.
And so he came out to EOS because he wanted to get there. He wanted a coach to help him put in place the structure to get out of the weeds. So we started doing that. And what ultimately he decided to do after some health issues was he wants to exit the business now. Now, when we look at EOS, now we're putting in place a framework where the business can operate without him. And so coming from an exit perspective, what I've realized is this thing is going to make his business much more attractive and much more valuable.
Right.
So in that aspect, now as he's going through this exit process and working with an investment banker, the diligence is faster because now he has all of his stuff documented. He's got clarity on who's in what seats. He can hand all this information. And acquirers are looking at his business and saying, wow, this is a professional organization.
This is kind of turnkey almost.
It's
right?
turnkey, right? So it reduces the risk, therefore increases the valuation for him. There's another company that is not exiting their business, but the owner came, same situation, right? Most owners come because they're frustrated in some capacity and want change. He was in every seat on his leadership team. So he's doing everything, sales and finance and operations. And he's like, Dan, I'm tired. Like, I hate my business. Like, I used to love it and I love what we do, but I hate the guts of my business. How do we build a team around it? And so over 6 months, we've elevated people into every seat on his leadership team. And that's scary for him. He's still struggling a little bit to let go. But at this point in time, he now has a sales function and a finance function with different people in them. He has an operations functions with people he's elevated and empowered to take control of those functions. And now 6 months in, he's really starting to let go and delegate and is finally saying, like, I can see a light at the end of the tunnel. And so that's what essentially we're doing, which is these entrepreneurs are talented. They have these talented businesses. It's more around they're just not professional managers or operators. But if you give them a tool set, they can handle it. Right. They just need the tool set and they need the playbook. They need the playbook and they need to learn how to actually use the playbook, and then they can separate.
I think there's so many misconceptions, I feel, about entrepreneurs. First of all, our owners. Like we have these kind of like rock stars that we look up to.
Yeah.
People that are like really exceptional and kind of like not in any norm. They're not any kind of normative, framework.
Yeah.
I'm talking about like the Elon Musks of the world and these like kind of, crazy uber successful people that have been, I think, uber successful because maybe they're smart. I'm sure he's definitely, they're smart, but a lot of it is kind of right place, right time. So there's a huge luck component to it. But for every one of those, there's 100 businesses, owners out there that are, by all metrics, super successful.
Yeah,
we just don't know about them.
Absolutely.
Right? Because they're millionaires or whatever, if you want to use money as your measurement for success, which I don't like using, but they're happy. They have good families. They're like committed to the stuff outside of the business. They have a good work-life balance.
Yep.
And they've been financially rewarded.
Sure.
So, like, who's telling those stories, right? Those to me are very interesting stories. Like, I have 2 sons, and I tell them, I'm like, the person that you want to, model your life after might not be the person that's going to get any kind of notoriety on social media or whatever. There's millions of millionaires in this country. If you want to use a monetary, and most of them are small business owners.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them are small business owners. So what have they done? What have the ones that have been successful outside of their monetary success, like the work-life balance part, what are they doing well? And I think that gets kind of undertold.
Yeah, I would agree.
So the point is, like, some people work 100 hours a week, but in my mind, they're doing it wrong. If you're working 100 hours a week and you've been doing it for years, there's something wrong.
Yeah, I strongly agree.
Yeah. So, like,
strongly agree.
You should be able to get this done in 40 hours a week. And if you're really playing the playbook right and you're building a self-sustaining business, as an owner, you should be able to step aside. That should be the goal, right?
Yeah, it should be. But a lot of the times, I was that person. I worked 80 hours a week for the first 4 years of my business, but it wasn't anyone forcing me to. It was, and this is probably every business owner. It's just, you have this thing inside of you where it's like, you have to. Mm-hmm. You have that anxiety of, what am I going to miss if I don't do this? And so you don't let it go, but you're in your own way. It isn't until, in my experience, there's an inflection point where you have some sort of pain or enough pain where it's like, I have to change.
Yeah.
And for me, that was a couple of panic attacks and where it was seriously, like, where it's like, I cannot do this anymore. So and it's in those moments of clarity where you have enough pain where all you have to do is drop your ego and look at, what can I do to actually fix this or make progress? There's tons of solutions out there, tons of operating systems, not even just EOS. Yeah. There's other operating systems out there.
I noticed you have a kid now.
I do.
You have a child, which is what, 9 year? What?
She's 16 months.
16 months, year and a half? Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
That was big for me.
Yeah.
I had to decide because I had been through a couple iterations of an agency that I owned. And I was like, had a couple, honestly, like uh, almost bankruptcy moments
Mhm.
when I was first starting New York City, like end of the 90s, early 2000s. And then we decided to have a kid.
That must have been scary.
So I was, not to make this about me, but I left New York City after 9/11, it was 2002. I had a 1-year-old child, and I was on the verge of bankruptcy because
Mm.
I just got annihilated by dot bomb. Dot bomb just like killed me.
Yeah.
So I had to kind of move to Kansas City where I grew up and kind of take a job, which I was not super psyched about working for somebody else. And then eventually that business went bankrupt, and I ended up with a couple of clients from that business, and I started over again. But I remember when my kids got a little bit older, and I was more involved with them when they were not just infants, but like I could play with them, I could do stuff with them. I'm like, this is my first job.
Totally.
My first job is to be a parent. I'm going to be the best father I can be, and then I'm going to work on my business to make money to be a better father. And then I was able to kind of ride that for about 15 years, and I grew my business in the meantime. But I wasn't a father, in spite of my business. I was a father first and a business owner second. And then once the kids got old enough and they're driving and they're like,
Yeah.
Dad, we like you, but I'm going to go hang out with my friends,
Totally.
So it kind of like switched, and it became like the business became more of my primary focus. But that's all right.
Totally.
That's all right. Like, I think that's the other thing people, need to learn is that there's not one way to do this.
Mhm.
Like, you build a business for yourself, and then you bring other people along for the ride, and you hope that you can build a really good team and that everyone has a positive experience and everyone can have a livelihood out of this. But, you don't have to drive yourself crazy. You don't have to drive yourself to a nervous breakdown.
Yeah.
And if you are, then,
That's right.
then get some help. Talk to some people. Figure out maybe
Yeah.
like where you could take some of the pressure off or simplify or there's probably people in your periphery within your team that are more than willing to help that you just haven't
Yeah.
asked them.
Yeah, business owners though, they're lonely, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there aren't many people that they can talk to at the end of the day on what they're going through, and needing to fire somebody next week and they're like freaking out over the weekend by
Yeah.
themselves. They
Yeah.
can't talk to their wife about it. They don't have friends who own a business like that. I think that's what holds people in is they just
Yeah.
don't have anyone to
It
talk
is
to.
lonely.
And
It's true.
So I think community is something that,
Yeah.
I always advocated for an owner. It's
Yeah.
like go find people who are in your situations.
When I joined this e-commerce agency group, I was like, oh my gosh, I just became part of a global group of misfits that I completely understand.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
we've all had the same pain, and we have this similar kind of wins, similar kind of stories. But it was so nice to have like a sense of community that weren't people that were in my business as an employee or working with my business as a client. They were just colleagues that
Yep.
can kind of share, similar background and similar stories. And maybe that's something that, you might be bringing to the table with your consulting, and that Verado might be bringing to the table too, is that sense of like, we're all kind of want similar things. There's different success stories that are interesting. We obviously learn more from our failures, right?
Yeah.
So those are also good stories to tell. But let's not struggle. Let's not struggle alone.
Yeah, I agree with
like
you.
let's get some
Totally agree with you.
more people in the room. I think that can be very helpful. And like on a final thought, like it can become so personal. Like if your business isn't going well, it's not your business that's not doing well. This is the way you emotionally engage with it, having been there. It's you that are failing. That's
Yeah.
the way you think of it. And it doesn't matter how much logic you can try to brainwash yourself into thinking that that's to convince yourself not to feel that way. You still end up a lot of times feeling that way, and then you start to feel kind of lonely because, like, okay, my business isn't doing great. I have to let somebody go. The last thing you want to do is ask for some kind of sympathy. You just
100%.
let somebody go.
Yeah.
Their lives are
You're
all,
an asshole.
Yeah, you're an asshole. So just shut up and take
Exactly.
it. Take your lumps.
Exactly.
Yeah. But maybe you can go and talk to another business owner and be like, that was rough. And like, yeah, I know I had to do that last year or whatever.
Yeah, it really isn't. It isn't fun. I mean, it's not like you said. I've had those moments too, where it's like, I'm letting people go and I'm freaking out inside. That it's like, just I want to be liked by everybody.
Yep.
I like these people too.
Yeah.
It's just and at the end of the day, you feel like you can't say anything because you're hurting people's livelihoods. So like, why should anyone feel bad?
Yeah.
Like, that really is the reality of a business owner. I think it's the curse of entrepreneurship too, is like, you have to carry all that shit inside yourself.
Totally. Yeah. And it's like, if people can always point at the owner if the business isn't going well. The owner can't point to anybody. You got to point to yourself. You got to look in the mirror and say, like, this is me that's screwing this up.
But on a positive note, it's
yeah.
I love entrepreneurship is awesome in that the sky's the limit, right?
Yeah.
So to your point, just getting a community around you, committing to learning, getting out of your comfort zone, and also getting out of your ego. I mean, you can build something incredible from scratch. And I mean,
and overcoming your fears,
totally.
Right? Because things are changing super fast right now. A lot of people are fearful. But whenever the world is like that, and there's a lot of disruption, there's huge opportunities. Huge opportunities. So that's what I look at. It's like, yeah, there's things to be afraid of, but there's also things to run towards.
Totally.
Right? And maybe that's kind of part of the mission, right?
I agree with you.
Run towards. All right, cool. That was a good talk. I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Dan. So Dan Bubniak. See?
Everyone gets it wrong.
I not get that?
That's everybody.
Okay. So anyway, Dan, thank you so much. Again, I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. Entrepreneurial Operating System is the program
framework.
Traction is the book, and Dan is the master.
That's right.
All right, cool.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.